Then let's begin. So, everybody, welcome to the Take the Guesswork Out of Budgeting with MMM or Marketing Mix Modeling. I'll be your host today. My name is Alejandro, and I'm the go to market enablement manager here at Triple Whale. And then we have our very own Kevin Wolf, who designed our MMM. The brains behind the product is here with you as well. I want to say hi.
Pleasure to
Kevin.
have you all here. Looking forward.
All right, so let's begin.
That's my cue to click.
Yeah, that's your cue. Click. All right, so let's begin from like a very high level. What is MMM and how does it work for those of you that don't know? So it works in 4 stages. First, the MMM collects relevant marketing and non-marketing activities that could potentially drive business performance. It then connects these activities to actual business performance using advanced statistical models. It then quantifies the effectiveness and sales impact of all these activities. And then it runs simulations and optimizations to estimate how certain changes will affect key business metrics. So it takes all this data, models it out, analyzes it for you, and tells you if you change this one variable, this is what you should expect at the back. So, next slide. Why do brands use MMM? There are many reasons, but there's 3 key ones. The first is there are certain limitations with attribution. It's hard to convert these multi-touch attribution insights into actionable budget decisions at a channel level. We all know that ROAS doesn't truly tell us the incrementality of a platform, and there's a challenge in connecting all these inputs to achieve optimal spend levels across channels, like to find that golden ratio across all of your channels. The second limitation we have, or the second reason brands use MMM, is because there's a budget decision risk. There's no way to forecast what certain budget changes will do to your revenue. If you increase budget of channel A, you can't say that next week your new customer revenue is going to increase by X or Y%. With MMM, you can do that. So this limited visibility sadly leads to a lot of risk in making suboptimal budget decisions. And finally, there are a ton of measurement gaps that attribution can't capture. We all know of halo effects when you spend money on Meta. We all know it's very hard to track TV, radio, newsletters. And there's all these sort of things like seasonality and promotional events that we can't incorporate into our decision making. MMM helps you capture all of it. So now that we understand more or less from a high level what it does, why people use it, let's dive into who could be the potential users of MMM. So let's start with in-house media buyers and performance marketing managers. The primary needs of this group is they need to allocate budget across channels. They need to do the day-to-day budget management of campaigns and moving from channel A to B. And MMM connects these budget optimizations to business outcomes like, let's say, increasing your new customer revenue. Second, we have ad agency teams. They need to justify budget decisions to their clients. They need to go to their clients with data-driven strategies. And again, they need to make sure that those budget recommendations align with the business's overall goals. On the higher end or the higher level, we have agency account managers. So they need some way to validate whatever it is that they're recommending to the clients. They need some way to measure their own ROI. And they need some way to foster some form of strategic alignment across all the initiatives that they're proposing. Because MMM works at a high level, it brings all these things together. And finally, we have marketing directors or CMOs. From a very high level, these people need to predict the outcome of their budget decisions. They need to justify investments in different channels, and they need to attach precise ROI to different optimizations. So MMM gives them that very high level clarity to make these decisions. So which brands would be a good fit, ultimately? If you're a multi-channel brand, and let's say you run not only the standards, so Meta and Google, but you run TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, you need something that brings all of this together. Not only displays the data, but shows you how to take action based on all these inputs. If you have a high marketing budget, as you spend more and more money on marketing, these channels begin to overlap even further, and you don't know what is signal, what is noise. MMM helps you determine that. If you're a very measurement-focused brand, and by measurement focused, we mean a brand that wants to have a little bit more scientific rigor or attach more scientific rigor to your process. If you want to find a way to make your whole process a bit more, let's say, scientific, because MMM provides hypotheses and it tells you what would happen if you were to act on these hypotheses. You're no longer guessing. If you experience a lot of view through, like we all know with Meta, you spend a lot of money on the ads, nobody clicks, revenue comes in. How do we attach that? How do we determine that Meta is doing that? Well, with MMM, we don't need to take Meta or any channel at face value. We can see that happening. Now, also, if your brand experiences seasonality or promotions, every brand technically does, but with MMM, you'll be able to factor that into your actual decision making because it can learn from the past. And finally, if you have any other channels that are not click-based or not even digital, so print, TV, newsletters, radio, we'll be able to incorporate that, all of that into your MMM so that you can see your digital channels, your print channels or TV, your offline channels, and you'll be able to make decisions across all of these in one view. So as you guys know, our bread and butter is MTA. And just to let you know, like, how do we delineate between both of them? Like, what's the actual difference between multi-touch attribution, pixel, and MMM? So the approach with MTA is very click-based. It's a user clicked, what happened to that user? MMM is very top-down. As I mentioned before, it takes all the data and aggregates it. The data used in MTA is very user level. It focuses on clicks, impressions, conversions, the journey. The data with MMM is aggregated. It's focusing on larger data sets like weekly spend, sales, etc. The granularity with MTA is it focuses on individual touch points, whereas MMM focuses on campaign types. Like, is this campaign a prospecting campaign, retargeting campaign? How does that fit in? MTA is best for ad level optimizations, like should I turn this ad off or this ad on? Should I move budget from ad set A to ad set B? MMM is very strategic. It focuses on should I move budget from channel A to channel B? It doesn't care too much about the individual ads within those channels. MTA is very real time. We can tell if a user clicked an ad today and what they did that day. MMM cares about slightly longer periods, like a week. So they'll tell you what to do this week based off last week's data or the modeling of last week's data. A simple filter to determine which tool you should use is if you ask which ad drove this order, MTA can solve that. If you're asking a higher level question like what if we were to shift 10% of our budget from Meta to TV, MMM is a tool for that. So what does our MMM actually look like? So on the right, you can see that we have our MMM and you have the high level metrics and you have the channel level metrics at the bottom. So what does this MMM allow you to do? So what does our MMM allow you to do? And what are the 4 key features within our MMM? Okay, so the first one is you'll finally be able to confidently allocate budgets with recommendations. So we're not only going to show you the data. So before we just showed you the data and you had to decide what to do with it, now we're going to show you the data and tell you, increase this campaign by 15%, increase this channel by 10%, move from TikTok to Google, for example. Secondly, we'll be able to give you unified insight from every channel. So you'll be able to go beyond clicks. You'll be able to integrate data from non-digital channels like TV, podcasts, influencers, even owned media like email and SMS. So you won't have these blind spots in performance anymore. Everything's going to be considered as a whole. All of this allows you to do scenario-driven decision making. So no longer do you have to try to guess what will happen if you take an action. You can run these simulations and the MMM will tell you, if you take action A, let's say if you move budget from Facebook to Google, we should see that your new customer revenue increases by 10%, your ROAS will go up by 5%. It'll tell you, you'll be able to act within a scenario, not just in isolation. And last, it gives you a confidence score that you can trust. So because it's a model and because it uses very well-known statistical models, it gives you a confidence score. It tells you how much or how well it's performed in the past. And with that, you can know that you can trust the model now. So you can see on the far right, there's a confidence score percent that says 95%. That's basically telling you how well that model has performed in the past. So when you look at the data today, you know how accurate that model is. You don't have to guess. And finally, to tie this all together, we're helping you interpret all this data. So we'll offer strategic advice from experienced media buyers on how to leverage the MMM. We have media buyers with years of experience. They have analyzed data before. They help our biggest brands scale. And we also have people that can help you take all these insights from the MMM and create it and move it into AI workflows to automate the thing even further. So when you think about Triple Whale's MMM, what makes it different from all the other MMMs out there? And I think the thing that makes Triple Whale's MMM different is what makes Triple Whale different in general. And you guys know all this about all of our products. The MMM is easy to set up. It's incredibly user friendly, so you don't need any technical skills to set it up. You don't need to be an analyst to use it. You can combine it with our best-in-class multi-touch attribution, so you'll have the high-level decision making, and you'll also be able to do the in-the-weeds decision making with our pixel. You'll have access to agents that automate the whole thing for you, not the decision making itself, but the analysis part. And it all comes at an accessible cost with many one-click integrations. And it basically removes the need to use any other tools. Like you'll have attribution, MMM, you have enrichment with Sonar, AI analytics. It all comes together in one place. And now we're actually going to show you all of that. So I'm going to pass the baton to Kevin, who will show you what it's like to set it up, like how easy it is. We'll show you the dashboard and what it looks like, and who has a little surprise for you at the end to tie it all together. So on to you, Kevin.
Thanks so much, Alejandro. And hopefully you all now have a good overview of MMM, how it's different than MTA and traditional click-based attribution. And now we're going to see how simple it is to set it up within Triple Whale, look at some of the results, and then get to some ways to make the data pop even more. So let me just share this other tab right here. And let's hop into the settings. So I'm pretending like I have never seen Triple Whale's MMM before. This is how simple it is. All you have to do is tell the model what you are trying to optimize, whether that's revenue, profit, number of customers, maybe your subscription brand, if you care about new customers or all customers. Define my business goal. The model knows what to optimize. Then I have to tell the model what are my levers. So we break down things within Facebook to be like prospecting, maybe you have test and scale, different ways of slicing your data. We have search non-branded, search branded. You can choose to group Google together and Bing together or keep them separate. And all of these other things like Mountain TV, which is, there isn't going to be click-based attribution there. YouTube, which is traditionally more difficult for having clicks. So now I have my goals. I have the inputs to the model. And by default, we just let it run on autopilot. We can use last week's budget, or I could say, hey, there's a promotion. Let me tell the model to expect more money. Or maybe I just want to run a simulation and see, instead of spending $650K this week on advertisements, maybe I wanted to see what would happen if I spent 700 or 600K. I can set constraints for how much the model is able to move any channel. I could choose to include my emails that are scheduled to send, the text messages that are scheduled to send, if there's a discount percentage that I want to include, and whether to include Amazon or not. So a few knobs and whistles here, but really it's just set your goals, set the campaign groupings, and then run it for this week. But by default, the model runs on its own every Sunday night or Monday morning. So it takes last week's chunk of data, assesses how it did, and then gives you a brand new recommendation for the upcoming week. What does that recommendation actually look like? So as Alejandro previewed before, it tells you how much it thinks you're going to make this week. So you are spending 642K and it thinks, or it expects you to have 670K in new customer revenue. But it thinks if you take its recommendations, you can turn that into 730K in new customer revenue. And again, this is aligned to that business outcome that we're trying to optimize. So a nice 8% increase, nice 8% overall increase in our blended NC ROAS across all our spend. We can see here now what the actual recommendation is. So it's a weekly model, updates on a weekly basis, but because most people set their budgets to daily amounts, we give you change your TikTok daily spend from 1900 to 1700. The MMM model doesn't think that it's particularly effective, but it thinks you can maybe scale up Google or scale up a part of Meta, maybe scale down Amazon. So that's it at the channel level, but let's double click and refer to those campaign types that we set. It's not giving you a single answer related to Meta. It's saying these are good within Meta. Maybe some other parts of Meta are less good. It doesn't like mountain. It doesn't think that that's particularly effective. And these are things that the model can give you week over week to have really a structured plan for you to be able to test these recommendations and see where you're currently at versus where you could be at. Gives you a nice change there, how much to change in percentage. And you could really let the model run wild if you want. And then finally, for each campaign, what you spent last week, so what the model expects you to spend and where it thinks you should be at. This demo shop, we have over 250 campaigns, and it's giving you precise recommendations for how to move each one of these campaigns based on over 2 years of historical data that the model incorporates. Now that we know how much money we could make and we implemented and changed the budget for these campaigns, let's see how we're pacing. So this is on Monday. The model thought we were going to make or could make, say, 105K. Maybe I implemented the changes a little bit later in the day, so I only made it to 92K. Tuesday, $95,000 is what it thought I was going to make, and I made $95,000. So incredible level of accuracy that the model had here. And then throughout the week, you could see how you're pacing towards that expectation. Finally, as Alejandro was mentioning, you could see how well has the model historically performed. So each week, it's telling you it thinks you're going to make 670K with this allocation. Did that actually happen? So last week for this user, the model predicted that they were going to make 670K and new customer revenue. They actually made 680K in new customer revenue. So within single digits percentage off. And the model shows you if you had taken the optimized, you could have made up to 730K. So there's a little bit of maybe buyer's remorse for not doing the full optimization there. And then here are just some additional data science terms which comprise that confidence score. You can feel free to ask ChatGPT or your resident data scientist, or ask a Triple Whale, or ask Moby what these things mean, like CRPS, MAPE, Pearson, R-squared. But these are all values that we transparently give for how the model has performed. And you can continually monitor and see if the predictions are correct, if they're getting better, which is really useful to users. Just one final thing here. So you could see that this model has been asked each Sunday to give its prediction for the upcoming week. It's done that week over week since the end of March, but the model has been trained on data going all the way back from March 2023. This on the right side is saying, hey, make a prediction. This on the left side is saying, learn from everything that's happened over the past 2 years to improve the model. So they work similarly, but this is really where the model is asked to be put to the test. So hopefully that is helpful. How much prior data do we need for the MMM to work well? Great question. Typically, we, as Michael posted in the chat, we look at the past 2 years. You don't need to be a Triple Whale client for the past 2 years. The MMM model works differently than MTA in that we take platform data. So however much it says that you spent on Google and however much revenue we see in Shopify, that is what we're using. And then the model will create correlation between those two. So it's taking the past 2 years of data, but you don't necessarily need to have been a Triple Whale client. We backfill that data. Is the model based off ridge, regression, or Bayesian? We use a Bayesian approach. Great question. Cost, speak to your local CSM or AE. how does the model provide weekly recommendations during seasonal sale campaigns during a 6 weeks summer sale period? So because the model, Brian, thank you for responding in the chat there. So because the model is using the past 2 years of data, it has 2 previous summer seasons. So it's possible that that first week of the summer season, it won't necessarily catch it. But if you say in the model settings that we're expecting a sale this upcoming week, so in here, maybe each week there's about 20% discount, but this week there's going to be a 40% discount, and we're going to send a lot more emails, and maybe the budget is going to be very abnormal, not 650K, but it's going to be $1 million. So those are kind of ways of hinting to the model that something different is coming, and then it'll give a prediction. But maybe similar to the change of weather, it can sometimes be difficult to predict, but the model has historically been really accurate. Let's look for more questions here. Non-media variables, seasonality, inflation, competition. We do incorporate seasonality. We don't incorporate inflation, and we do incorporate some overall industry benchmarks, which are somewhat related to competition. Okay. Feel free to keep posting questions in there. Mike and Brian will answer. We got some of the overview. We got some of the basic functionality. Here's where the special triple whale sauce comes in. So as maybe some of you have seen on Twitter or in other places, our models have been getting some love in terms of the AI capabilities. So I'm going to show a little bit of a preview of that. There'll be a lot more of this at the Whaleys. So if you haven't signed up for the Whaleys, definitely sign up to at least watch the videos there. But what we can do is we can run a model, a nice LLM here with our agent builder, where we could say, hey, take the recommendation that I got, compare that to the platform data, what the channel reported, compare that to triple attribution, pixel, NC ROAS versus, the general ROAS, take the MMM's marginal NC ROAS, which is like how much it thinks your next dollar spent, how effective is that going to be? Take the MMM's NC ROAS, which is that overall number of how effective it thinks it is. The marginal NC ROAS is really that incrementality number that a lot of people are chasing. And take all these signals, put them together, and you know what? Let's also add in post-purchase survey data. Let's see how many people have said that they purchased because of Google or because of mobile games, or which is, AppLovin in this case. And now let's get a beautiful insight here written up in text. I produced this on May 8th. It's looking at this specific period. Here is the spend for these different channels. Here is the ROAS, the triple attribution ROAS, the channel reported ROAS. Here's how many PPS orders were associated. And this is just an absolute goldmine here of it doing all of the analysis for you. And it thinks reduce your spend. What the MMM said is correct. Take that part of the recommendation. Again, you can see it's going through TikTok. It's going through Mountain, Bing ads, post-purchase survey data, putting it all together, giving you a nice drop down here of exactly what the recommendation to do for each one of these categories. You can also see this at the campaign level, which is going to be really fantastic. It's giving you its rationale and gives you a nice list of action items, so that if you're thinking about how can I scale my brand, the best way to scale your brand is to have a strategy, and a repeatable strategy that week in, week out, you can come in Monday morning and you could refine this report to say, in addition to including post-purchase survey, I also want to layer in when new product launches have been. I also want to layer in what was my discount percentage over the past week. And you can continually get a more and more improved workflow to really think about how you can spend your marketing dollars most effectively and to scale up or to just really increase efficiency. And then we saw that in text, but we have these beautiful generative UIs in here with telling you the spend, here's how to shift with Facebook prospecting, here's where to decrease, where to increase. And all of this is something that you can access through our pre-built agents. And the level of depth here, the level of interactivity is only getting better, is really mind-blowing, even for me, who's the one building these things, just to see how the model gets better, how Triple Whale's data continues to get better, how our MMM gets better. All these things together are really going to supercharge your brand for this upcoming year. I can show more versions of this and talk a lot more, but would love to answer some questions in here and yeah, talk through some more. Okay. Are there any specific questions that I should be answering? Maybe Anthony or someone else, if you want to.
Yeah. Hey everyone, I'm Anthony. I lead product marketing at Triple Whale. Wanted to ask some questions that came in. So there's a bunch of good questions in the chat, so picked a few. How do you include offline spend like podcasts into our MMM model?
Great question. So Triple Whale has a data in API where you can send in your podcast spend or through, we also have custom spend uploading. But the way that it's integrated is what MMM tries to do is correlate spend and revenue. So maybe 1 month you were spending $100 a day on podcasts. The next month you were spending $200 a day. The next month you were spending $50 a day. The MMM is going to be looking at that and trying to isolate that signal by saying, hey, when you were spending more, I saw more revenue. And it's looking at it, as Alejandro mentioned earlier, from that top-down view of not necessarily which users came from podcasts, but what percentage of revenue can it attribute towards podcasts by seeing it fluctuate over time.
Love it. Thanks. How granular does our MMM get in regards to what it's looking at and the recommendations that it's giving?
Great question. So it can get as granular as you want. We have this kind of middle zone of campaign types, which is separating maybe meta into prospecting versus retargeting versus or Google branded versus non-branded, but you can create as many groups as you want. The issue becomes in terms of being too granular is you may not have been running that campaign for that long. So you can create as many groups as you want. It could be a single campaign, can be a campaign group. But generally what we recommend is kind of like a middle Goldilocks zone where you're really thinking about your tactics and how you think about the different levers that you can pull for your marketing budget. But you can double click into it and see the actual campaigns. And then that's where the pixel data can be really helpful. So we say increase Google P Max, which campaign within Google P Max should I increase? And then there you have the pixel data to kind of make those more granular decisions. Alejandro, did you want to?
Yeah, they just want to remind folks that the MMM is not a replacement for the pixel. They both work hand in hand. So you're using the MMM for that high level decision making. And when you want to get super granular, the pixel is going to be there to support it.
Love it. Super helpful. What does the onboarding look like for MMM and Triple Whale? And how is it different from other platforms?
So I don't want to call out any specific platforms, but with Triple Whale, like as long as your data is integrated, it's the flip of a switch. You just tell us what we should optimize and you set the campaign groupings, but the campaign groupings are even automatically done. So you could really do nothing, just pay for it, turn it on. But kind of the more that you invest, and if you really are particular about, setting those campaign groups and updating your budget, the model will give you a lot more, but it's really as quickly as I showed you. You just let the model run and the data is integrated.
Love that. And I guess on that same note, could a brand build their own MMM? And how complex would that be?
Totally. There's a lot of great open source tools. Meta has put out their Robin model. Google has their Meridian and Lightweight MMM, which are all fantastic to use. The difficulty becomes with building out your own MMM is there are a lot of steps in building out an MMM and testing an MMM in a rigorous way. So you can throw your data in, but to actually build integrations that are flowing in, that have auto grouping of the campaign types, to provide evaluation scores of the R-squared and the MAPE, and to graph it out, it tends to be something that maybe brands can do once, maybe, but to have an MMM be actually a part of your workflow and something that you're referring to week over week, you're going to want it to be in the platform that you're actually looking at your data in, and you're going to want it to be something that's robust and not just fitted to your specific shop, but a model that's seen thousands, tens of thousands of shops that are on Triple Whale.
Amazing. Thanks. So there's one more question, and then we'll want to talk about the future. How does MMM account for seasonality?
So there's multiple ways that the MMM accounts for seasonality. Within our models, there's specific points that you can set as like, oh, this is the beginning of a season, and it kind of detects that shift and change. And then the other way, I don't want to get into too much of like the technical weeds, but it can usually detect collinearity. So meaning where a lot of your spend is moving in a certain direction, and it'll pick up that, oh, this is the change of a season, that there's things moving in some way that can't just be explained by spend. And the model will incorporate that in as almost like an additional factor beyond your spend.
Amazing.
So a little bit of magic sauce.
Helpful. But good to get in the technical weeds every now and then, but glad that we don't have customers have to. Okay, last question. Where is the future of this product going?
So this is something that we're going to talk a lot more about at the Whaleys, but as I gave a little bit of a taste of, if you can imagine coming in on Monday morning and you see the MMM's recommendation, as well as what, according to triple attribution, according to first click, last click, linear all, linear paid, incorporating the PPS data, incorporating discount percentage, taking a web search of what has happened to maybe your brand or what's happened generally in the market. What we're building at Triple Whale and what we've always been pretty explicit about is that we are building the automated media buyer to turn media buying into something that's like high frequency trading that you can come in and be algorithmically run. And we want to really enable our brands to have the latest and greatest, a scientific process for their marketing investment strategy. And our models are getting better with Mobi, with MMM, with the tools that we're bringing in. And it's really exciting. And the capabilities are only getting more and more powerful by the day.
Love it. Really exciting. And to your point, even more exciting things coming at the Whaleys next week. So definitely sign up for the live stream if you haven't. You can find it on our LinkedIn. We just posted it today. But Alejandro, I think we can jump back in, or Kevin, I think we can jump back into the slides and wrap up.